U-Turn friends, it's Ash here, and today I'm bringing somebody really special onto the show. It's Smoke Wallin. He's the co-founder and director of dignitymoves.org. He created to end unsheltered street homelessness in our communities by building interim supportive housing with rapid, cost-effective, scalable solutions. He's also the managing director and partner at STS Capital, which is a global boutique investment bank focused on M&A. I was, talking to Smoke before we hit record, and he has a lot of experience helping founders exit their company. I think a lot of you listening, no matter what stage of career you're in, maybe you're not even dreaming as big as to realize that you could create something in the world that someone else can take, that you can hand over, and that you can be not just financially rewarded, but the fulfillment of being able to really create something that lasts the test of time. So I'm really excited to ask Smoke about this because I myself have my Wise Whisper agency with the TEDx talks. We have so much business coming in, and I've actually thought as a creative, it would be really beautiful to exit someday or to get acquired someday. And I say someday, and then I kind of catch myself like, okay, let's put a timeline on it, not someday in the next 3 to 5 years. So I'm constantly working with my own dreams, and I think it's going to be wonderful to talk to him about this. And he's led, around $1.7 billion in M&A deals, financing publicly and privately. He served as the co-chair or co-founder and chair of Vertical Wellness, which is a health and wellness company. He's helped build National Wine and Spirits. Honestly, the list goes on. He's been an active leader in YPO. If you haven't heard of that, it's a Young President organization. And he's the chair for YPO's Pacific One chapter from 2022 to 2024. His accolades just go on. And so what we're going to talk about today is dreaming bigger, creating those visions of if you can actually build something and how to approach it from a mindset perspective and so much more. So Smoke, thank you so much for coming on the show.
Ashley, thanks for having me. I really am honored to be here.
Yeah, it's a really beautiful thing to have an entrepreneur on the show who has not just had his own exits, but helped other people with theirs. There's a level of, I make you sound like a roast chicken. There's a level of seasoning that you have that we don't always have on the show. We have a lot of entrepreneurs on here that maybe are still in their own companies or one day they want to exit. So I'd love to just start there. Like, what do you think it is inside of your personality or inside of your skill set that you've had to hone the most to be this person that hasn't just created success, but has helped it happen over and over and over again with consistency?
Well, thanks. I'll start with this. That I think that certainly in my case, but I think this is true of many entrepreneurs. Like a lot of times, some kind of personal struggle or challenge that one has while they're growing up drives someone to want to do this crazy thing called entrepreneurship because it's not for everyone. Let's face it. There it is. When you throw your hat in the ring, whatever business it is, it doesn't really matter. It's a topsy-turvy world. You're going to run into lots of challenges. There's going to be all kinds of ups and downs. The highs of highs, the lowest of the lows. And the thing that differentiates people that jump into it are, really like a level of resilience and a level of ability to adapt to the changing conditions that you have. And usually it doesn't start with the entrepreneur thing. It usually starts with something else in your life, like some challenge you had, some disadvantage you had, and not always, but I think a lot of times that have. And I certainly had I had challenges we won't get into here, but like certainly had a traumatic early childhood and some other things that like happened as a very young person that affected me greatly and drove me to have this like desire and need to go out and do my own thing to achieve things. And so like first of all, you've got to have a burning desire and willingness to take punches, take arrows, take whatever you want to call it, take the blows as you go. And I don't mean to make it. I'm not trying to discourage anyone, of course,
Yeah,
but
it's real.
but also it's like that's the reality. So like if you're if you're going to be an entrepreneur, be prepared. Like this is not for the meek, right? Ain't for the meek is what we like to say, and that's okay. It's not for everyone, but I think that that's one thing. Like usually someone came into it with some kind of, some reason that they want to do this and they're willing to stick their head up above the crowd. They're willing to take a risk. They're willing to, take a chance of, because, there's no guarantees, right? So, some of the best things I learned were big flops and things that didn't work out as well as I had hoped, if you learn from those, then you've got this magical power to get through things in the future. So usually it's not the first startup that someone is a big success. Once in a while you get a Steve Jobs or somebody who just creates something and it works the first time. But usually it takes a few different times before you get it right. And that's the differentiators, people who dust themselves off and either pivot within the business or call it a day, say, all right, that one didn't work. Let me take a breather and then all right, I'm back at it. Right. So it's like the willingness to keep going is I think one of the first things.
It's so interesting because I feel like when you're younger, if you start a business, like my first business was an e-learning platform for career coaching, and I had online courses. And the short of what happened, which I've never really spoken shortly about it because it was such a long thing, and I wrote about it in my book, was I had a Facebook ads guy who was also my coach. Great, very, very smart guy. There always felt like there was something illegal about him because I'm like, why are you coaching me to do this well when you could be doing this well? I understand legacy, like I understand that motivator, but he lived in Alaska and like things just didn't really add up. So anyway, not to say that Alaska means something's wrong, but there's something about his life that just felt off. He ended up taking 10% of my ad spend because that's what you take for managing people's ads. And I was spending about 500K a month in ads at my peak. So he was making a pretty good check from my ads management. We ended up spending $2.5 million in ads over just a few months because I had an e-course that after a year of failure and a webinar script that wasn't working, it did really well. And when I realized that I needed to slow down, he didn't want to slow down because obviously there's a conflict of interest for me to slow down him scaling me when he's getting paid. In the end, the numbers stopped adding up and he really pushed me to keep scaling to see if the numbers would fix themselves. They never did, and I ended with $500,000 in debt. I went from $6 million of revenue in 2 months, half of it was profit, to zero. And I think a lot of people who have really built something, they know how the tidal wave works with overhead and team, where it's almost like you could walk away with millions in the same month. You could completely let the tidal wave get you and hold on for too long, and your overhead gets eaten up, and then you have no profit left. So there was about 4 years that I was so burnt out, and it was my second TEDx talk that changed my life. It went viral, and this speaking agent approached me, and I started going on stage talking about losing all my money and what I've learned from it, about friendships, about business. And there was a really long period of time where I thought, this is it. My success has been, I've peaked. Like my big idea happened. I don't have any new ideas. And so I think a lot of people, whatever they're doing right now, they may have a belief like this is their best that they've got. Like there's no other, and I would have never thought I'd be running this agency. We've written 100 TEDx talk. We've booked 1,200 of them for people. It's like, I never would have thought this is what I'm doing. I never would have thought I'd have life force energy for another idea. I never would have identified myself as somebody that could have anything that I thought I would build to sell. Like I don't see myself still. I'm working on seeing myself as that person that can do that. And so for anybody who's listening, what would be your take on ideas? Because I know a lot of people that they're kind of like spinning their wheels and they're in between. I think most of life we're in transition and people are struggling to not be in transition. They want to have the thing, you
Yeah.
know? So yeah, any wisdom around clarity, vision, and choosing from your ideas?
Yeah, definitely. And you have a great story, and I think it's a wonderful example. I mean, exactly what I was talking about, having resilience and being willing to go, after you got into an upside down situation and got into debt, and then being willing to figure out another way to go at it again, right? And not give up in your dreams. And not just go take a job to pay off your debt, to go like risk it again. And obviously it's been a great trade-off for you to go do it again. I think a couple things come to mind. Um, you know, one of them is, we are what we thought before today, and what we think today is what we will be tomorrow. So we are infinite beings. We are infinite beings stuck in this physical body of constraints. So the physical world we live in has all these constraints. As a young child, as a very young child, you had no constraints, and then one by one, they whacked you, and they just like, no, you can't do that. No, you can't do that. No, this is not possible. Oh no, you have to follow these rules, and no, you don't. You can't be silly. You have to do this. And so by the time we're adults, we're like, we've been beaten down to this idea that we have these big constraints. They're societal, they're family, there are all these different things that we think are the norms. So what I would say first is, you referenced your dreams a couple times and never imagining. Well, you did imagine, and you did come back to your dreams, because you wouldn't be here today if you didn't think that I can do this at some point. Now, you may not have, known exactly how it would unfold, exactly how you'd get here. That's okay. Like that's the thing. We don't need to map out every step of the way, but we do need to think big. So magic of thinking big and not having constraints, and no matter what you think the constraints are, there literally are no constraints. So whatever you think you can be, but you have to believe it, you have to stay focused on it, and you have to do the hard work that needs to happen. But the hard work starts with your mind first.
Mm.
And like, so this is a little off the topic, or it is, but it isn't, of
Right.
entrepreneurship. But I think it's really important for people, especially, I wish someone had explained this to me when I was starting out. But the average person has 60 to 80,000 thoughts a day. And if you take a minute and you try to count them, it's hard to do, but that's what happens. You have about 60, 80,000 thoughts a day. Something like 90% of them are recurring. And of those, a lot of those are just like stuff that got put into you as a child, between the ages of 0 and 7, that were like, you were absorbing everything around you. You were in a theta state of brain, which is the state what you get into in hypnosis or a deep meditation. But until you're age 7, you're in theta state kind of all the time. So you're basically hypnotized to listen to whatever the heck's going on around you, right?
Mm.
So if your family was like, "You're the best, Ashley. You're awesome. You're going to be a superstar, rock star. You're going to, be this giant hero," and they said that every day to you before you were 7, then you believe that. And if they said, "Hey, you can't do that. You have to follow the rules. Hey, stop coloring outside the lines, Ashley. I see that you're not following the rules again." Then that's what you had in your subconscious.
Mm.
So we're all dealing with this. This is just a fact. Like everybody's dealing with this. So the cool thing is, once you understand this, you can reprogram that subconscious conditioning that you started out with as a child, and you can reprogram it to be whatever you want. Now, there's ways to do that. So what I would say is, like, people who, first thing is, get a handle on like the monkey mind thought process, where you've got all these thoughts coming through your mind. Most of them, probably aren't your thoughts. They just came to you because you were conditioned a certain way. And you don't fight them, just start noticing them, right? So if you start noticing, like, oh, I am having these thoughts. Oh, what that guy Smoke said on Ashley's show, like, he was right. Like, there is a lot of thoughts. And yeah, you're right. There's a lot of recurring thoughts. Like that time when Bobby pushed me down in the playground when I was 10, and I never forgave him. And I always kind of, that story like keeps popping up. Like, who the heck cares? Bobby's long gone. Like it didn't really affect me, but it affected me for decades. I would go back and I remember that story. How many of those stories do we have
Yeah.
of our childhood, or our growing up, or just, somebody broke up with you, or, your friend slighted you, or, whatever, like different things that like you held in your mind. What I'm here to tell you is, by letting all that stuff go, by forgiving whatever, Bobby and anyone else, that did something, you free up yourself to reach your potential. So back to your question, like I'm a young person, I'm thinking about I want to be an entrepreneur. I don't know what to do. First of all, get a handle on your brain and your the wild thoughts happening, and try to get it to where it's like, okay, you understand that. Once you start noticing them, they start to dissipate a little bit. And we who we are is what we attract. So Ashley, I would say that person in Alaska who may have had good intentions, may not, certainly had conflicts.
Right.
You probably, at the stage you were in,
Yeah.
now your vibration attracted that person, and it wasn't the right match, but like that's probably where you were vibrating, and it unfolds that way. So before you start jumping into partnerships or relationships with people, it's really good to get your vibration where you want it to be. So where do you want to be? Ashley, where do I want to be? Smoke, what do I want to be? I want to be this very positive person who's people look at as someone who is willing to help no matter what, is here for the greater good. And yeah, I want to be successful. I want to have great ventures. I want to, we all want to have those things, but they come as a matter of course of being the person I want to be. And now I only attract those kind of people in my life and in my business ventures. It's only those people of the highest integrity that vibrate at the same level that I vibrate. And if I could go back in time and say, the ventures that didn't work out as well or whatever, most of them had to do with that, like
Mm,
me not being, and I'll take the blame, me not being who I could be, who I really wanted to be, and
mm,
therefore attracting people who didn't necessarily, have the best, ethics or values or approaches. And if you build a house on shifting sand, the house is unstable. So you build a business, you have to start with a solid foundation. And that solid foundation needs to be high integrity, people that vibrate at the same level, and you need to be there too. And that's the most important thing. That doesn't matter as much what you do. And I'd say if you get that right, you can just do my old saying. What I used to say is ready, fire, aim. That was my strategy. We get into planning prison where we're just going around and around and trying to figure out what's the right answer. What's the right answer? Well, you know what? Sometimes the right answer is just pull the trigger, jump in, and figure it out. And if you do it with high integrity people, odds are you're going to figure something good. You'll have some kind of good outcome, and it will unfold in a good way for you.
mm. That's such a good, you talk a lot about like vibration being where you want to be. And I feel like when I look at the team that I'm building right now, I've never been so inspired by the kind of people, and they're coming to find me. Like our marketing director, her name's Ashley as well. She just messaged me in the DMs. I didn't even advertise that I was looking for someone. I never even thought I was going to replace myself because I was doing my marketing and I had a story in my head that I'm the best at getting my thing out there. It is a gift I have. I had job hunting courses, and it's a whole business of pursuit. Like I was teaching people pursuit through job hunting. And so for me to be doing the business development for my company, it felt like a role I would never hire out, but I would love the idea of it. And so she came to me out of nowhere saying, "Hey, can I do outreach for you?" And um it's blown my mind how talented she is. Also, my project manager came and found me out of nowhere. I really needed help. And I do think it's interesting because there's still trial and error, right? Like I had somebody come in for a few months, they weren't a fit. So I'm constantly getting these feedbacks of like, I'm an experimental person. My frequency is always somewhat in experimentation. But I've attracted these people that I'm really inspired by. So that's kind of cool to think about your perspective on that. But I also think when we think about who we want to be, um, sometimes we have to be in this like boss energy, and I don't want to be a bossy, mean person ever. And then there's also boundaries, right? Like I've got one of my speechwriters, one of the most talented guys I've ever met. He always forgets his laptop and joins our meetings from an iPhone, and then I have to share the screen and run the show, right? Like he's not, no matter how talented he is, he's probably not a fit. You have a confrontation, you let them know to please do better, and then they don't. So it's like, how do you handle those more unpleasant moments where you need to really step up and set boundaries and navigate people who aren't performing, navigate people who maybe want to be paid more, but they're not providing you with the value. Um, I really struggle to harden where I need to harden. And my partner, he works in venture capital. And my living room is like Shark Tank every day. He's getting pitches every day for people raising money. And he's told me many times, you have to harden. Like, this is an area that you're being too soft. So I know a lot of people listening probably resonate with that. What would be your 2 cents on that? Because I really struggle with that personally.
Yeah. Well, no, and it's the most, it's quite, you're not alone, right? So
Yeah.
lots of people struggle with this. And, hardened is one way to look at it. And I might have used that word, in the past. I think it's more, um, being clear-minded. And that's not hardened necessarily, because you can be kind and clear-minded. And clear-minded means, there's nothing wrong, and there's actually, perfectly legitimate for you to have, clear expectations, a clear work, like a company culture that you're building with your team, that has, performance and, showing up and giving your all to the team and to what you're doing, as like the company ethos.
Mhm.
And the most important thing, though, is to make sure that that's clear. So I think where we get into trouble is when we assume that we have expectations that are high, but we assume everyone understands those expectations. So if you haven't been really clear, then take ownership on that part, right? Like, you own it. You own the fact that, like, it's really important that everyone that's part of the team is very clear on what is it that we're trying to do, what is our company culture, what is expected. And instead of it being an expectation that a lot of times we have a silent expectation. I've done this a ton of time. Have a silent expectation of, here's what I know I would do in that role, so I expect that, but I haven't really done a good job of making sure that that person knew, and they're not you. They don't know exactly what you meant. They don't know exactly what you would do in that role. Like, you're running the company, so obviously they're not there yet, right? So, I think number one is, if you've done a really good job of communicating what is it that, and building, it's like going from expectations to mutual agreement. If
Right.
everybody can agree, like, this is our culture, this is what you're agreeing to, here's what you're signing on to be a part of this, and you get consent, right? Like, get everyone to agree, like, all right, this is how we're going to roll. Then it becomes a much easier conversation to be clear-minded and say, hey, Smoke, you're not doing what we agreed to. I noticed that, like, you're showing up without your laptop. You're always the last person in the meeting. That's disrespectful to all the other team members. And then we talk about this and agree to it. And then it's up to me to say, well, yeah, you're right, and I've had this problem. My mom's sick, whatever, whatever it is. But I commit to fixing that.
Yeah.
Now, if I don't do it after that, it's not being hardened. It's just being like, hey, you didn't do what you said you do. We're gonna make a change here, and that's not hardened. That's just clear-minded.
Mhm.
So it's just a different, lens of, and it doesn't feel like you have to be hardened if you do a good job up front. So as a leader, you hear this word a lot, but I believe it and I live it. It's like, the servant leader is what, I aspire to always be. So what does that mean? That means
Mhm.
everyone is working on behalf of, like, the goal of the business, whatever. But my job as the leader is to make sure that all my team understands their role, has all the tools and, support that they need to achieve what their mission is, and typically, like, I'm trying to make sure that if they don't, I'm fixing that. Like, how do I make sure that you can do the best you can do, Ashley, in the role you're in? And if we're not doing something as an organization, if there's something I can do as the leader, how can I help you? Are there skills you need? Is there help that you need in a certain piece of your job that, like, you didn't realize that you didn't know? What are the things that we can be helpful? So then I'm like your partner. I'm your servant leader. I'm helping you achieve the mission, and you can't help but respond in a positive way. Like how do you not like say, well, that's the wow. Like, I mean, yeah, I guess I got in trouble because I wasn't doing my job, but I'm not really in trouble. Smoke's here trying to help me.
Right.
And not everybody's going to work out, and that's okay too. And, it's the easy, one of the most cliche advices that almost that is like most people don't follow,
Mm.
but is so true. Slow to hire, quick to fire. And what does that mean? Well, you take your time communicating and making sure that the person that's coming to be a part of your team really fits, they really get the culture. You have a trial run. I mean, you can take experiments, but like, hey, why don't you come and be a part of the team for a little bit, and then let's have a review and see if the fit is there. And then once you've selected them, you weed out a lot of people, in that process that wouldn't fit anyway, right? And then if they make it through that, the odds are they're going to be a keeper.
Yeah.
But if you get in there and now it's official, and 90 days in, you realize like, whoa, that wasn't what we experienced in the trial period. They're totally not what we thought. Then go with your gut. Like, cut your ties, end it quickly, move on.
Yeah.
That's the best advice anyone ever gave me, and it's really hard to do, but it's like that's clear-headed, that's clear-mindedness.
Yeah. Yeah, it's like there's a lot of like maybe people pleasing of like not wanting it to be the case that it's not a fit, wanting to, be this person that supports everyone. And the reality is you got to stay true to your vision because who you are and what's true for you is always going to shine through. So whether you rip the band-aid now or you rip it later, it's got to get ripped. May as well rip it. So one thing I'm thinking about just from your wisdom is around the exit. Like, there's a business owners out there like me where maybe they have an agency, they want to sell. I have my agency. I would love to either get acquired or exit at some point because I know me and I know that creatively my bandwidth for like my life force energy for whatever creative I'm doing is going to move. I usually can station and build for a while. I love everything you said about like expectations versus agreements. Like I think expectations, it's like coach, I don't know if you've ever listened to Steve Chandler, but you remind me of him.
Yeah.
That's interesting. He talks about expectations versus agreements, and expectations are these silent things that kind of put you in a victim role
Yeah.
versus agreements are powerful. People don't want to break their promises. So when I think about, wanting to make a decision around how to build myself for an acquisition or for an exit, let's say somebody has their first 5 people working for them, they're not even employees, whatever it is. What are some things that people should be thinking about way early, like, in the early phases to prime themselves for these opportunities?
Yeah, no, that's a great question, and thanks for asking that, because today, I've had 6 or 7 YPO qualifying companies, which is a certain size by the time you're running, but which is a lot, right? Like, so I'm like you, like I've done a lot of ventures, and I've had a bunch that didn't qualify, but I've also had 6 that did qualify, which means they got to a certain size. And I've had teams. We had our one company had 1,800 people and was $1 billion, and then I've had a bunch of small businesses, along the way. So it's like it's all over the board in terms of style and type. And now what I get to do is work with entrepreneurs like yourself, and help them maximize their effort and their exit. And it's funny, like I didn't think about it, and I had a number of exits that if I didn't have me, I didn't have me advising me. I had me, but I didn't have like a person in my role now, and I left a bunch of money on the table because I didn't exactly think about this fully. There is how does a buyer view your business? If you kind of the context matters a lot, right? We're always stuck in the content of our lives, whether it's in a relationship, whether it's running your business, whether it's whatever it is, you're stuck in the content. So you're living, everything is coming at you, your 5 senses plus your brain, I'll call that the 6th sense. You've got all these thoughts, you've got these, and you're like stuck in the content. Just take a step out of that and look at the context. And the context of an exit is, how does someone else see me? How does someone else see my business? What would be important to the buyer in terms of sustainability, in terms of growth, in terms of like potential. And what are the things, a lot of times there are lots of choices you can make. Some of them are more valuable than others to a buyer, right? So we always, I don't hate it, but it's not my favorite when someone called me and said, Smoke, I want to sell my company this year. What do I need to do? I'm like, great. Why didn't you call me, 18 months ago? I could have given you a few things that we could do that wouldn't cost you anything, but you would be positioned a little bit better. But like, of course, we'll work with what we have, but it's harder to do if you have less time. So
Yeah.
thinking about it from that lens and like who are the natural buyers? That's what I usually do with my entrepreneurs is we do a brainstorming session where we just like there's no bad ideas. Just it's like how do you think about all the different potential strategic partners that would fit with this business? And invariably there'll be some that were like they'll never buy this, like that's not going to happen. And then those people that are on that, oh no, that's never going to happen, they end up being the best partners and winning the deal and paying the most and being the best fit. It's not always about money, right? So sometimes it's about like your role in the organization or your team. There's lots of other factors besides money, but a lot of times those off the wall groups that like aren't necessarily directly in your business, but are in a peripheral business, but this fits with, would value you a lot more because you're helping them do something they're not doing, and it adds a lot of value. So those are the kinds of things that we start thinking about from a perspective of getting out of the day-to-day content and thinking of context
Mm.
of what's the bigger picture. And the other thing, from my perspective is, I don't take on any project until I have alignment with the owner, the founder, the shareholders. And what I mean by that is, what are your real expectations? It's kind of the same thing with employees, but what are your what's your desired outcome? Obviously, I want to make as much as I can, great. But like there's usually more to it, right? Like here's what would be a good exit for me. Here's what would be a obviously beating that is obviously, the goal. And then here are the other factors that matter to me. I want to stick around. I want my team to be a part of it. I don't want to sell to this competitor who I don't like, whatever. Like there's always different nuances to it, but it's alignment so that we have really clear agreement on like, all right, here's what we're working to do together. And then you have a really interesting synergy that happens where we're working as a team to find the perfect fit. And that's kind of what I do. It's like I'm like a global matchmaker. I was in Singapore, as we talked about earlier. I was in Singapore last week, finishing up a deal. I'm selling a South Asian brewery to a European brewing company. I was in Tequila working on a project there. I was in Washington, D.C. working on something else. I've got all these different projects. And what's happening is we're finding like based on the owner's expectations, outcome, what they really want achieved, and understanding their business deeply, then we're like figuring out like who in the world fits this, and every country is different, but like, some countries are like, oh, like Japan right now, all the big companies are like, well, we need to go invest and buy stuff outside of Japan because Japan's not growing. So we know that there's companies in Japan that really are looking for interesting companies all over the world, but they don't know how to find them. So we're like, all right, well, this fits this guy. And that. So we're doing a lot of that work, but it only works if we're aligned really fully with that entrepreneur.
Mm. Mm. I think that like one thing that people get stuck on is kind of like what you were saying at the beginning of like who's going to want to buy this. And so you can start to dream, right? Like in my case, it's like, all right, we write and book TEDx talks. That's a very special service that a lot of PR firms don't do, but they want to do. So the obvious would be like a large PR firm that has a huge roster or a huge talent agency like CAA that has a huge client roster that TEDx is like an obvious thing for them to all do for their clients. But in the early stages, it's like, how do I even start to think about when it's time to approach those conversations? And I don't know, like how or who to even approach within those companies and be taken seriously.
Yeah, and that's where having a good partner and that understands that is really useful. Because I bought like 50 companies and brands over the years, on my own. Like I didn't use bankers. I just went and bought them from other entrepreneurs. And I think I made great deals. But when I sold my businesses, I also thought I could do it. And it was a totally different dynamic. And so having someone that can help you, obviously it's got to be a group that fits the size of the business, right? Like I can't do very, very small deals, but like there are people that do that kind of advisory work.
Mhm.
And then there are big, really, really big deals that I could do too. But like generally, we're not competing for $5 billion deals with Goldman Sachs, but we are in the $1 billion down to, call it 50 million or so transaction size, which is a very big range.
Mhm.
And with that, we can really do this. So, I think you're not expected as a entrepreneur to necessarily know this, but there's lots of things to educate yourself. I think there's ways to network with folks like myself and others, whether, and again, like I'll say it like at the risk of being, opening myself up, I spend a lot of time just helping people, and like
That's right.
they're not deals that I'm going to do, but it's like,
Yeah,
I'm always happy to
that's right.
point people in the right direction and give them some thoughts on it, and be helpful, because look, we're all in this together. We all, come into the world at different points, and we've got a limited time, and then we're all exiting. All of us. Everybody's going to exit.
Yeah.
100% of us, right?
Maybe not their business, but well, maybe that's one way to exit your
No,
business.
everybody,
Quit it.
nobody gets out alive. So, all right, so we're
Yeah.
in this together as humans, and so how do we help each other? This is not, like competition is healthy and good in a certain way, but like the reality is, we're here for this limited window. How do we be good humans and be good to each other? Start with that, and then everything else will take care of itself.
Mm. Mm. You talked about like different groups that help with sales, and I think that might even be new information for people. Like I'm such a do-it-myselfer that like I imagine a lot of people who have smaller businesses wouldn't even realize like there's companies that their job is to sell your business and take a cut of whatever or
Yeah.
whatever the arrangement is. How does somebody begin to find a trustworthy company, and when should they be reaching out to that? Like I'm thinking about, some people listening who have DM'd me over the years, and they have also like one has a book publishing agency. She has 5 people on her team. Another one has a social media management agency. They have 25 clients. Like I'm thinking about these people that I know they want to do that, but it's like when do they even think it's time to start reaching out to these companies? And how do you trust a company? How do you know? Because it's crazy out there.
Yeah, yeah. No, I mean, there's not a one size answer, but I think first of all, make sure that you are vibrating. I'm going to go back to that at the right level. Like you're clear with yourself and what you want, and you're not so because you're going to attract the type of vibration that you are operating at. So if you are out there with like giving and in gratitude and with love, and you're like, you have this gratitude feeling, and that's where you reside, that's who you're going to attract. So you're going to be able to trust your instinct on people. So we always think like, oh, is there some list of who are the good people and not? And how do we tell, truth from fiction and all this stuff? And it's hard, right? Because there's people that are good at pretending.
Yeah.
But if we can quiet our minds, and we can go back to the 60 to 80,000 thoughts and kind of quiet that down, and really be into your true self, your heart, and kind of, you have an instinct. I'm sure, Ashley, you have a spider sense or a intuition that is like, oh, okay, I can trust this person, or I can't trust. Like there's something innate in all of us. Some people are more aware of it than others, but we all have it. And the more you can quiet your mind, the more that inner voice will tell you. And we'll get maybe a little bit beyond the normal scope of what
No, this
you
is very
guys talk about,
standard
but
for us.
like
Yeah.
we are energy, right? Like you know that, right? Like
Yeah.
there is matter is just slowed down energy. It's all like energy. Like we are energy bodies, and we have an energy body around us that we can't see. Some people can see them, but we have this like energy. when you go into, like, think about this, like someone walks in the room and they light up the room, or someone you encounter gives you bad vibes. What is that? Like, that is your energy, like self, which is a real thing, telling you something that's real information that isn't your mentation, isn't your brain doing it. It's your kind of innate self saying, oh, that person is vibrating at a bad level. That person's vibrating at a high level. I want to be around that person that lights up the room. What is that? Like, what is that? What is that? That's a higher vibrating person. And, love and gratitude and um, uh, those kind of emotions are very, very high vibration.
Mm.
Anger, guilt, shame, those are at the low end of vibration. And so, like, you feel it. You can feel this stuff, right? And so, like, what I would say is that doesn't necessarily help you. Like, how do I find the person to help me with sell my company? But, like, get in touch with that intuition that you have and trust it. Like, that, I think the biggest problem people have is second guessing their own intuition, right? Like, I knew I shouldn't have done that with that person. And I could talk dating game, or I could talk business partners, lots of history, right? And I knew I shouldn't have done that, and I did anyway, and it backfired. Well, what was that I knew? Like, that I knew thing was some intuition that, had I listened, I would have been a lot better off. And so I think there's an inner knowing, and so I would trust that. I would trust that and learn to listen to that, and then like listen to yourself.
Yeah. And Smoke, you feel like your cup is full. Like you feel like you've got space to help people. You're in like not only your own capabilities, skill set, gifts, but also in a bit of legacy. I know a lot of people are ducks right now. They're swimming and their cups aren't like full enough to give to people. They're struggling. They've got tough customers, tough businesses they're building. They can't make payroll this month. Um, what's your ethos around like the tough times and specifically around the tough customers?
Yeah.
Like, what's your take on those?
Yeah. So again, it'll sound it sounds hard to believe, but the most important things, and the things that have gotten me through some of the toughest times, is just be getting into gratitude. It's really hard when you're stressed, and you're like, as I've been there. I had a tech company I started, and I raised I think it was like $60 million back in 2000, which was real money back then, for my .com idea. And I went from 0 to 122 people. And then we had the .com bust, which you've read about, I'm sure, but it was a really disaster. It was a horrible time in tech. And so all the VCs were running for the hills, and people were trying to get their money out, and those of us that were trying to build businesses were like, well, I'm sorry, the world is falling apart, but I'm building a company here. So that was a really tough time. I ended up buying out my investors or my VC partners, and continuing on with the business. But just getting back to being thankful, being grateful, and just saying thank you on a regular basis. Like, thank you, thank you, thank you. It sounds weird, it sounds hokey, but trust me when I tell you that if you say thank you all day long, from the time you wake up to the time you go to sleep, anytime you're not dealing with someone directly, you just say thank you to yourself all day long. Say it, just keep saying it. You can't help but feel gratitude. I don't care if you're out of money. I don't care if your business is going to go under. I don't care if your customer's trying to fire you and is a atrocious human and being really mean. If you say thank you all day long, by the end of the day, you're going to be in a gratitude moment. Now, what does that do for you? Well, you're now vibrating at a different level, and you're going to attract where you vibrate. So synchronicities happen because you're vibrating at the right level, and you're able to attract the solution to your problem if you keep your vibration high. If you allow yourself to go down the spiral of like, oh, I'm going to lose this business, and that's where your thoughts are, that's what's going to happen. You can't allow that. So basically, you've got to control your thoughts. So we started the conversation with what you thought about is what you are. What you think about today is what you will be. So when you're in the worst situation, it's the hardest thing in the world, right? When you're in the worst situation, can you keep your emotions? Can you take the negative emotions and flip them and make them gratitude? Can you get to gratitude? If you can, I guarantee you, you will have a solution to your problem will show up. Something will happen. Someone will show up and say, "Hey, Ashley, a different customer will show up," or someone will say, like, "Hey, I'd love to put some capital into your business and help you with this," or I don't know what exactly, but something will happen that is the positive thing. But you've got to get your energy up. Otherwise, you're attracting the negative energies, and that's what you're dealing with. So that's the most important thing. And no one told me this back then. I did it by accident a number of times, and it was able to, like, people were like, how did he do that? Like, how? I mean, there was a moment when I had 2 weeks of cash left. I had like 80 employees. I had $100 million backing from a group called SoftBank that was supposed to put money in my deal. And at the last minute, their due diligence, we passed it. So they were supposed to fund. Then they're not returning my calls. Market's collapsing. NASDAQ is going down. And these guys like backed out of my deal. And I finally got a hold of them. Like, what happened? Like, oh, the market's not what it was. So we're not gonna do your deal. I'm like, what do you mean you're not gonna do my deal? We spent the last year talking. I eliminated all the other people. You were gonna fund this thing. So I was in a situation where, like, we literally should have shut the business down. We had 2 weeks left. And instead, I went inside. I got to this gratitude. No one told me about this. I just did it. And solutions opened up. And I ended up closing a $48.5 million round 2 weeks later from different people. And I couldn't even tell you to this day, other than what I'm telling you now, how it happened. And people were like, how did he do that? Like, all I know is I got to gratitude. I got to a positive place, and it attracted what needed to happen. And that's happened a lot of times, but no one told me about it. So what I'm telling everyone is what I wish someone told me about, because if I knew it, I would have done it a bunch more than I did.
Mm. This has been so interesting to kind of just hear your thinking. Is there anything before we go that you would want everybody to know, or like advice you would have given yourself forever ago, now that you're kind of where you're at now with your gifts and your experience?
You are an infinite being. There's no limits to what you can do. And anyone that tells you that there are, don't listen to them.
That's so good. Thank you so much for coming on the show. Is there anywhere that you put content out for people to learn from you? Is podcasting like, where can people learn more?
I mean, you can connect with me on LinkedIn. But you got to put a note in there. If you're just a rando and I get a friend, like, I can't. There's too many. But if you say I saw you on Ashley's show, whatever, like, I'm happy to connect with people. I put content out there. I write poetry. It is. People are like, my friends are like, what is up with you? I write poetry about positive things. I only put positive content out because I believe that this world has way too much not positive content. So I only put positive. And so my Substack is just Smoke Wallin Substack. I think it's I forget what it's called, but anyway, you can look at. I'm the only smoke, so you can find me, Smoke Wallin. And that, if you want like my poetry, which is like explaining the world as I see it, you're welcome to join me there and subscribe. And yeah, so those are the two. I mean, I'm on Twitter and stuff, but I usually just post that content on those other platforms.
That's wonderful. Thanks for the positive thinking. I think that's what we all need. And, we're all human, and getting into gratitude can take a lot of work sometimes when you're having a really hard day. And so I think that these reminders are the little things that echo in our head when it's really hard. We feel up against a wall. It's like, okay, gratitude, gratitude, gratitude. Thank you so much for being here.
Yeah, and last thing, maybe
Yeah.
you made me think of something. So it's the way to get to gratitude. Just say thank you. You don't even have to say thank you about a thing. You just say thank you, thank you, thank you. It'll happen. Trust me on that. But you only worry about the things you can control. So the things that are outside of your control, you don't control what other people do. You don't control what the market's doing. Politics, who cares? Like, I mean, I care, but it's like it doesn't matter. Like, it's not going to affect my life, and it's not going like paying attention to the back and forth. Anybody that's trying to divide anyone on any political side, don't listen to. Stop listening to it. Stop paying attention to the riffraff and the ridiculousness. Focus on what you control. You control you. You control your vibration. You control where you are emotionally. You control how you behave around people and what you do. If you control those things, you will have, I guarantee, success. There's nothing that can stop you. Stop paying attention to everything else.
Mm, mm. Thank you so much for coming in.